Welcome everyone to the February 10th Arborist call. Our meeting agenda follows a pretty familiar format. We just have a quick, welcome and meeting intro, kind of go over what Arborist calls are for people that might not know. We kind of have a standard section where we do research and implementation updates from ZebraD, Zcashd, really any protocol development team that happens to be working on anything protocol related. So we're looking forward to having Kedit join us on a regular basis on the alternating Arborist calls that are a little earlier in the day to fit them. We have an open discussion period. NU5 has consumed the bulk of the discussions for the past several months. We also have an item, Dodger, you'd mentioned adding in, if we have time, whenever, no rush, but just to talk about like outbound network connections. Zcashd currently limits it to 8, just to kind of discuss that. So I'm sure we'll have time to work that in today. And then also, in the amount of time we have, if there's anything anyone would like to bring up, even if it's not on the agenda, more than happy to discuss it. At any point in time throughout the call, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat, raise your hand, or whatever, and we'll just kind of keep it interactive and hopefully a little more enjoyable that way. Level set for Arborist calls, all about the protocol. We talk about timelines, R&D efforts, design, implementation. It's an opportunity to collaborate with other teams doing protocol development. It's to make protocol development more accessible and provide transparency for the community at large into all things protocol. So we put these up on our YouTube channel, usually within a day or so of the Arborist call. So they're out there for folks to go back and take a look at it if they'd like. Anybody can participate. If you're interested in protocol development, you can just register, hang out, listen, ask questions. If there's something you'd like to present or something that you would like the team to discuss, the folks that do come to these meetings regularly, you can just let me know, Stephen@electriccoin.co, and we'll get you slotted in, or we'll slot in a time to kind of do a deep dive discussion on whatever the topic was. Okay, so with that, we'll move into the, kind of the standard research and implementation status updates. We always go first with Zebra. So I'll turn it over to whomever's going to do that on the foundation side today. And you're more than welcome to share your screen as well. I can stop sharing if you'd like. And
no, it's okay.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. So yeah, hi everyone. Those last 2 weeks we working on. So our current goal is to finish release candidate of Zebra, and we're kind of solving some outstanding issues that they just were left behind. So we're now working on them. We worked on some CI improvements that were important to speed up CI, which was a bit slow. We are now caching some things, which helps a lot. We were downloading the sapling sprout parameters every CI run, which the ACC server didn't like, understandably. So now we're caching those. And in Zebra itself, we are now handling not found messages, which is something that is not totally required, but it helps for inventory tracking. So now Zebra both handles not found message from other peers and also sends not found message to other peers if they request something that Zebra doesn't have. We are now logging estimate of the sync process. So if you start Zebra and you start syncing, you're now printing the log, it's 10%, 11% done, which is really useful because before, you start Zebra, you didn't have a good notion of what was happening. Now the user can easily see what's going on. And finally, we work on some code changes in preparation for the zip245 changes. So basically, we need to feed some new stuff for the Zcash script library, and to have this, we had to change how we load the UTXOs before calling Zcash script. This is now done. So yeah, regarding zip244, we're now just waiting for the updated dependencies so we can resume work on that. And that's it.
Cool. Very good. I think I know the answer to this, but for CI, you all use pretty much GitHub Actions, right? Is that the kind of the automation that you use, or do you
Yes,
use any other
that's
tools? Okay.
mostly it. We have some integration with Google Cloud for
Okay.
building images, and which we
Right.
use for testing the sync itself. But it's mostly GitHub Actions, yes.
Yeah. Cool. Very good. So Dodger had a question. Curious if the repeated downloading of the params triggered anything, like from Google Cloud, for example, on our side. I don't know the answer. Dara suggested it might be bandwidth throttling. I know Marshall's on the call and Taylor as well. Did anything? Did we see anything? I don't know that we saw any kind of spike that was concerning that we couldn't explain, but I'm not positive on that.
In the chat,
Marshall just said that it triggered throttling that had been put in place following that incident a while back. Yeah, I apologize for that. It was not deliberate, and it probably is worth having as and when people start actually running Zebra and Anger, probably having a conversation about how best to handle that that sort of thing.
Well, it's nice to see that the throttling worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least it tested it.
It didn't work the first time. So.
I guess I was still muted. Can you hear my mic now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's the third mute. Always is. Yeah, no, it didn't cost us anything. We had a couple of issues. One of them was like this. So we put the rate limit in place and it operated as expected. So there's no extra cost or anything. We're going to start doing that when we or make explicit in our documentation about the param downloadings and best approaches. But yeah, again, it didn't cost us anything. So no worries at all.
Cool. All right, very good. Okay, thanks. Thanks for that update. We'll move on to Zcashd. Usually we've been kind of rolling this update into the NE5 update, but I would kind of like to pause, and I know Chris and Strat are on the call, just to kind of talk about primarily the amount of work that's going into Zcashd at the moment. It's obviously in support of NU5. But I was chatting with Chris just a few moments ago, and he's been doing a ton of work on the wallet and unified address support. The wallet being the Zcashd wallet. We have the mobile SDKs as well, but in this case, we're talking about Zcashd, of course. So Chris, Strad, any update that you want to provide just about some of the changes going into Zcashd? I know they're pretty massive for unified address support.
Sure. So so we have unified address support almost ready to land probably in the next day or so on Zcashd master. This is unified address support without the full Orchard integration, but we decided to split the Orchard wallet updates from unified addresses so that we could get everything working with unified addresses, and then adding Orchard into that environment is simpler than trying to do them both at once. So that is all almost there. It includes both unified address support and Zcashd wallet addresses are now derived from mnemonic seeds. So that conform to BIP44 for the transparent piece and ZIP316 for the the shielded pieces. And so this so there's one change for anyone who decides to start playing with the new Zcash wallet, which is that there is a cycle that you have to go through to confirm your backup of the mnemonic seed before the wallet will permit you to continue onward. And all of the existing APIs work. There are also a number of new RPC APIs that have been added, in support of unified addresses. And yeah, that's all of those will be detailed in the release notes.
Yep. So some pretty massive changes. I think
to that I will add long exhausted sigh.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think the diff on that one PR is about 10,000 lines, right, Chris? Roughly.
Yep.
Yeah. So
we've had PRs recently that have broken GitHub, or at least broken GitHub with certain web browsers.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess another related
API, yeah.
A related note is that something that has merged in Libris Zcash is so we had a prototype of auto shielding functionality on Libris Zcash on a branch for almost a year, and that branch has finally merged. There is still more work to do before the 5.0 release that we want to, additional changes that we want to make on auto shielding, but that the existing APIs there have been stabilized and are now in Libris Zcash Master. So that was also another significant chunk of recent work, and the PR that broke GitHub.
Right. Yeah, that was really big. Cool. All right. Very good. Thanks for that. Yeah, just moving into NU5.
Oh, sorry. I was muted.
Go ahead.
There were also some database schema changes associated with that PR. Will that affect compatibility for other users of Libris Zcash?
Yes. The way that the mobile SDKs handled that, because they were already using a variant of this branch. I think they're using this branch, but just an earlier version, including the schemas. They'd implemented schema migrations themselves in the mobile SDKs, but that's one of the things that is blocking on cutting a new release of the Zcash client backend and Zcash client SQLite crates is having those schema migrations available, like having APIs that will implement that. So if your current modus operandi, if anyone's using them outside of the mobile SDKs, which don't know, but maybe someone is, then if your current modus operandi is just always call init wallet, then previously if it was just adding a new table, it would do the right thing. After this change, you will also, if you have an existing database, you will need to call perform some schema migration with some API yet to be determined. Whereas if you have a brand new wallet and you call init, it will start with giving you the latest schema.
Right. And just for clarity for everyone that might be watching this after the fact, we're talking about schema migrations in the SQLite database that used by the SDKs, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, the SQLite database constructed and used by Zcash client SQLite crate, which is what's used in the mobile SDKs. So if you're using the mobile SDKs, they already have those migrations internally.
Okay. All
this
right.
is just for other users.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, kind of obviously everything we just talked about is related to NU5, but I thought it was good to kind of throw that update in there since the team's been really driving hard on getting these last little pieces in, last large pieces in, I should say. NU5, for sake of completeness, here's the new zip set. These are updated zips, just kind of for reference. Everything is always on zips.z.cash. And then timeline-wise, wow, I'm jumping around everywhere. So this is kind of where we're at on the Zcashd side in terms of release. We are in February here. We're looking to get 4.7.0, which is where everything we just discussed, unified address support, et cetera, will go into for the Zcashd node. And then we'll roll back testnet. So we'll have a testnet reactivation that follows. And then we'll EOS halt all the 4.6, 4.7 releases prior to mainnet activation. And then we'll have 2 releases in the field. So we have a couple of gating factors on 5.0.0. One is the security proof that Sean's been working on with Mary and Strad and Dara and some others on the team. That's coming along well. No significant update from the last call. I don't know if Sean was going to be late. I don't know if he joined yet, but that's coming along. Don't anticipate anything coming out of there that has any material effect on what we're doing. So that's really going well. The other gating factor for 5.0.0 is the security team at ECC and the core team kind of sitting down and going back through the consensus rules in the circuit one more time, kind of an internal review, and then kind of giving a thumbs up that everyone's happy with it. So so that's kind of
Taylor and I have made a start on that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's been we've done some of this kind of throughout, but this is to just kind of go down and make sure that all the bases are covered and everyone's happy with everything and how it landed.
We just also pushed up a PR for the Halo 2 proofs crate that now that essentially the code went, used some names for things, and then the protocol definition used other names, and so now we're now that both of them are relatively stable, we're going through and renaming things in the code so that it all lines up. So after there's a PR that will be landing soon, which will mean that after that, when you're reading the Halo 2 protocol implementation and then looking at the protocol design doc, everything matches up like variable name wise and so on.
All right. Strad, do you want to go over like the Halo 2 crate structure, kind of some of the changes that were?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in a previous call, maybe, but yeah, to recap, we've restructured the Halo 2 repo, so it's now a workspace. We now have the Halo 2 proofs crate, which contains everything that was in Halo 2. We have the Halo 2 gadgets crate that contains all of the common sort of standardish gadget, reusable gadgets that we implemented as part of Orchard, but need for things like recursion and that other people are likely going to want to use. So they've been pulled out of the Orchard crate into a Halo 2 gadgets crate, and then the Halo 2 crate is where recursion will live. So the next release, which is going to happen, I'd hope to do it today, but the renaming PR isn't quite in yet. So either late, tomorrow or Monday, we'll cut versions of those 3 crates that. So the Halo 2 crate will go back to being empty as of that beta 2 release, and then everything else will be that the versions that get used in Zcashd 4.7.0. And then there will be additional changes, to APIs and things, but that will basically be pretty stable to what gets used in 5.0.0. Assuming nothing else gets found in that affects those particular crates in the final review.
All right, very good. A little bit different view of a timeline. This is not necessarily Zcashd specific, but this is the overall flow for NU5. We're obviously in hopefully the latter stages of NU5. I say that Strad summed it up. This is and some PR he was looking at, this wound up being a whole lot bigger than we thought. So I'm like, that's actually not a bad tagline for NU5. But anyway, yeah, fingers crossed. So anyway, the same, no date differences here, just a different view of NU5 overall. So, so any questions on Zcashd? Addy has a hand up. Go ahead.
So I see that in the end of February, there's a testnet reactivation. Where can I find more details about coordinating around this time frame?
So that's actually something we wanted to discuss today, I think, or in the very near future, in terms of exactly what's going to happen there. So the process for doing that is the same as we've done in previous testnet rollbacks, which is just, we agree on the new testnet activation height and the new consensus branch ID, because if the consensus rules are changing, the definition of those rules, the identifier for those rules on the network also needs to change in order for the nodes to be able to properly manage the consensus state. So that will amount to someone calls, an RNG to get the new consensus branch ID, and then we open a PR with that and the height. And then Zcashd nodes.
I always put Easter eggs in them.
I don't. I go like, head dev u random xxd or whatever, and use that to get my my random bytes. So I put Easter eggs in there if I have a weak RNG.
We'll see who gets the PR first.
Yeah. So the process then becomes, since Zcashd is the main implementation in place, is it will just be people roll that out. Zcashd detects the rollback, does the rollback, and people's NU5 funds vanish, and we go from there. As far as Zebra goes, I presume you will have a similar PR workflow once there is an activation height, and then a similar tag, and here's the thing people should start running. I don't know what your state rollback stuff is like, or if you have that, or if it will just be drop the database and start again.
The latter.
Yeah.
That's the best state rollback approach.
Yes.
So what we do is we do a fake database format version upgrade that doesn't actually change the database format, and then everything starts from the start again.
Nice.
Nice.
And actually that will just invalidate all of the blockchain state then, but you don't even have a wallet yet, but if you store the wallet in a separate database, then it will be immune from that, which will be quite nice. Although I guess you would, the only thing there will be the ensuring that transactions that were mined get correctly shown as these are no longer make sense, that's effectively what Zcashd does, but with its rollback of incrementally backwards. The transactions that were mined will become unmined and then become conflicted effectively, because they can't ever be mined. So Zcashd's wallet tracks that state. I don't think you'll need to track that, at least for now.
So Addie, did that answer your question? I saw your hand. I think it went back up, actually.
Oh, so I get the idea. I just wanted to be in the loop if when that's happening. So are we not expecting the other version updates until the testnet reactivation? For the next release of Zcashd, are we only targeting the support release after the reactivation, or are we expecting anything come before that?
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly.
So to keep it simple, are we expecting a new Zcashd version?
Yes, 4.7.0 will be that release. That
4.7.0, Go ahead,
yes. The 4.7.0 release is running 4.7.0 for Zcashd will be sufficient to follow the testnet upgrade.
Right.
And so then in addition to that, there will then be anything that is handling consensus branch ID. So for example, making signatures, all of that will need to be made aware of the change to the consensus branch ID. So I believe like WalletD just exposes data directly from Zcashd, so it should be fine. It should pass that through. But any signature stacks, so for example, the mobile SDKs, anyone using them on testnet, there'll need to be an update on that end, which will roll through as the Rust crates get updated, and then that rolls down. But anyone running their own stacks will need to adjust, but that'll be visible because if they try and make transactions, the network will reject them as having the wrong consensus branch ID.
And the release notes for 4.7.0 will kind of detail out all the pertinent info.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Cool. All right. I'll bounce along. Okay. This was again a topic that Dodger just kind of threw in there about talking about like outbound network connections, and I'll stop sharing so I can see everyone a little bit better. And yeah, we'll just kind of, I think the question was, so Zcashd, and I may say this wrong, so someone can correct me, Zcashd limits that to 8 outbound network connections. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and the question was, did Zebra D need to do something similar, or what are the considerations? But anyway, I'll just turn it over to the Zebra D team.
So I think Strad had said that the 8 outbound connections was inherited from upstream Bitcoin Core. I'm literally reading out what Strad wrote here, if I recall correctly, to try and lower the incidence of highly connected nodes. I was just wondering, like, is that still something that we need to worry about? And yeah, what do you guys on the Zcashd side reckon we should do on the Zebra side?
Hey,
I'm just pulling up the relevant stuff from where is it? Where did this live previously? I was just constant net.cpp, I see.
Yeah. Nate raised his hand. Did you have something to?
Well, I have an opinion, but
okay. Yeah.
So I guess there's 2 parts to it. One is, yeah, we just inherited Bitcoin's behavior without taking a lot of time to understand it. So just by following the principle of don't break something that works, we could keep it.
And there has been research on the structure of the Bitcoin network, and it's very bushy is the best way to describe it. It's very highly interconnected, so it seems to work.
Yeah, so maybe we don't want to break something that doesn't work, but I'm wondering what the motivation would be to prevent the network from being highly connected. And I'm especially wondering if there's anything related to privacy, which might be different for us, or if it's more about like denial of service resilience or eclipsing attacks or stuff like that. I'm not really sure about the motivations.
I'll try and find that paper on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
it'll take me a while.
Yeah, the number of yeah, I'm trying to find some of the details from upstream. Like there's a PR from 2012 in which someone was trying to bump the limit from outbound of 8 to outbound of 125 to match the inbound limit. And the rationale that some of the Bitcoin devs go into was basically DOS prevention. In that if your node, if the Zcashd node, like if you have a highly performant node, then you can run, there is a config option to bump the number of inbound connections you accept to be like, yeah, I'm happy to be highly connected. I've got the resources to allow it. So I'm going to bump that limit and allow more connections in. But by having just the base outbound limit be restricted to 8, it meant that, people who weren't aware of necessarily how to run a performant node and were just spinning up stuff, their nodes wouldn't contribute to overall, high usage, unnecessarily high usage of what is essentially a public resource, is my interpretation of what the Bitcoin devs were rationalizing that limit as. Now, the Bitcoin network does have significantly more, or has had and does have significantly more usage, and probably even more asymmetry than we do in the number of clients that still try and connect to the main full node network versus the number of servers that are available to service those connections.
Sorry, Taylor.
Can you explain what the public resource actually is? Because there are a number of different options for what it could be. And I think that what might help move the conversation forward. What's the limited resource we're trying to protect?
Well, bandwidth would be the primary one. And again, this was they were having these discussions as far back as 2012. So, we're a decade later, bandwidth is maybe not as much of an issue now. but yeah, it would like I was finding that number, and that number was actually it was hard coded in Bitcoin at the time it was imported from SVN into Git. So like 11, 12 years ago. So there's not really, I wouldn't be able to find good documentation beyond that.
I think I found the paper that I was thinking of. It's only up to 4 years ago, so it's not entirely up to date.
Oh, here we go. This was the PR I was looking for. Someone was trying to add a max outbound option. Yeah, here's this is the one I knew I'd seen in the past, which has some good documentation of sort of what they were considering upstream. So this was 2015. Yeah, because the resources we're thinking about here are like, yeah, there's just base bandwidth. There is the processing involved in like serving requests. So like, you know, users coming in and, you know, clients coming in and requesting blocks. And so, you know, the disk resources and CPU resources and bandwidth resources to fetch and provide those blocks outwards. There's the cost of the effect of that on block propagation times, which is another thing that I've seen people be concerned about in this regard, given that efficient propagation is important in a proof of work model.
So Nate, your hand went up and down and back up. So I think you were next.
Different topics, but I'm
okay.
Relatively certain that Bitcoin miners use a different relay protocol between themselves than the P2P protocol, specifically to have lower latency.
Yes.
So that's just something to keep in mind if we're comparing Zcash to Bitcoin.
Okay. All right, Addy?
I wanted to ask, do we have any research ongoing around the changing of resource params and the effect it has on transaction and block propagation and mempool limits?
Not that I'm aware of.
So there was a group trying to set up a Zcash observatory. I didn't follow what progress they've made.
I think at one point they were trying to set that up as like a branch of Zcashd, and then I think there was a PR that was being considered, and then the changes were like too extensive to really be manageable as a Zcashd merge, and so it was going to be a separate fork. And then yeah, I don't know what happened after that.
Cool. All right. Other questions anyone has?
Yeah, I think the core request here is what would be the effect of ZebraD having a higher base limit of outbound connections,
right?
And my initial, putting aside like the rationale for that existing, the main issues I see are, well, Zcashd is still using a relatively old version of the Bitcoin network stack. You know, as Nate said, we brought in on the Bitcoin code base in order to not have to, you know, do our own thing in terms of like network and stuff. But we are still on quite an old version of that network stack because, you know, a lot of our engineering resources got spent on zero knowledge proofs instead. And so that could potentially be a limiting factor at some level. Additionally, like the default inbound limit of 125 is something to take into account because you know, if Zebra is going to connect outwards in a very highly connected fashion, then you could start hitting the point where like we Zcashd nodes on the network just won't service any inbound requests, and the ZebraD nodes would crowd out any other Zcashd nodes. So that's
also note that there are default file descriptor limits that you eventually hit, and they're not all that big. So I think it's the default on Linux is 1024 per process.
I think so. So that in theory shouldn't be. I think we would be hitting the inbound 125 inbound limit first.
Yeah.
Because like the relevant number here is like the combination of how many people are running Zcashd nodes and how many people are running accessible Zcashd nodes. Because it's the inbound accessible ones that you need in order to connect out to the network, and rather than just like bare number of peers. Now I don't know what is ZebraD's like inbound capabilities like.
So the current Zebra outbound limit is 75 connections, and on mainnet we tend to actually go up to that limit. There's also a limit on the latency of peers. So if peers and the handshake take more than a few seconds, we don't bother continuing with the handshake. And then inbound, similarly, the limit is 50. It's slightly lower. And,
so you set a lower inbound limit than outbound limit.
Yes.
What was the rationale for that?
Outbound connections are selected by us, but inbound connections are selected by remote peers. So it's possible for a remote peer to fill up the entire list of inbound connections just with themselves.
I see.
And we have no way of identifying that they're all the same person attacker.
Yeah, I've always thought that the limit of 8 outbound for Zcashd was too small for that reason.
Yeah, I guess the thing here is, are you optimizing for resilience against malicious behavior versus resilience against just like innocuous thundering herds?
So if it's malicious behavior and someone is close enough to you on the network, then they can completely surround you, and then these limits don't actually make much difference to security. If they're further away on the network, then they may actually matter to security, and they definitely matter just for coincidentally getting connected to too many nodes in the same geographical area, or that have a single point of failure.
Okay. Nate.
Yeah, I'm wondering for both node implementations about several things, but one would be different kinds of use cases. So like,
can you increase your volume, Nate?
Oh, I'm not sure how. I can put this closer.
That's better. I think it was
no, that's good. Yeah.
So miners running a node versus like an individual running a node specifically to have a wallet, like a full node wallet, versus like a blockchain explorer might all want different parameters. I'm not really sure. I haven't thought about it, but it might be nice to distinguish those. And then I also kind of wish we had better documentation for like the design goals of the networking layer. Because when we're discussing like resilience against malicious attackers versus low latency for like miners or wallet users or connectivity or all these different trade-offs, it's hard for me to know like where to make trade-offs.
Well, our design document right now is, and design goal is, do what Bitcoin does.
Yeah, which isn't very specific, is it?
All right. Strad, your hand was up next, and then Daryl.
Yeah. Yeah, the concern I guess I have with having Zebra having a outbound limit that is greater than its inbound limit is basically just that we'll end up with connection slot exhaustion on the network if ZebraD becomes popular. Because Zebra, we make like this, if you have an inbound limit of 50, but an outbound of 75, then you're going to, and you say you always tend to hit that 75 limit, then you're going to, like the extra ZebraD nodes being added to the network will use up the connection slots that they themselves are contributing and then some. And so we'll end up in a situation where the network just becomes gridlocked and new participants won't be able to find anyone who will accept a connection.
I see. So what I was going to say is that these design decisions may interact with any decisions about adopting anonymity layers. So I know that we were thinking about more extensive Tor support and possibly mixed-net support. So those networks may have different characteristics in terms of their optimal connection limits.
Taylor.
Yeah, I take Strad's point about exhausting inbound slots. And yeah, I think we're right that the limit should just be the same, particularly because, or even perhaps the outbound limit should be slightly lower, because some nodes will be able to make outbound connections, but they won't be accepting inbound connections because they're behind a NAT or they've misconfigured their address. So yeah, so I take that point, and I think that's a larger concern because it can happen accidentally if the node becomes popular. In general, I think if connection exhaustion were to happen, what Zebra would start doing is marking a whole bunch of peers as failed, and then it would stop connecting to them. So it is a self-limiting process, but I don't want to go there if we don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
If it's if it's self-limiting though, that's still only for new peers starting up though. Like if you have a if you're a node and say you're the last one to be able to take up slots, you've made your connections, you're fine. The next one, the queue, will be the one that fails to make connections. And so yeah, it would stop trying to connect to those peers, but it wouldn't be able to connect to any peers. And so it'd be in a situation where it just can't bootstrap at all.
You're right, there is a timing issue. It does depend on connection churn and a whole bunch of details that we haven't tested. And I think it's correct to just fix this, even though I think over time the goal is to make it self-limiting. I'd rather not go there if we don't have to.
It seems difficult or more difficult to reason about a network that has two types of nodes with very different connection limits than it is if nodes are behaving similarly.
So we do have the opportunity, though, at least with the way that Zcashd is deployed and supported, to roll these over time in a way that older styles of node, connection nodes will drop off the network, at least with Zcashd. So when we have a bit more breathing room, something we could do is some like smaller scale experiments to figure out what the characteristics are of the network. Some sort of investigation into what the peers that are running, like how many of the peers that we observe as a whole versus how many peers are available inbound. What kind of mix of network participants do we actually have? I think I would want to know that before bumping things. But if we know that, and then we can be a bit more informed about that.
It would be really good to get a clearer idea of the network map. I think there has been some research on how to map Bitcoin-like networks.
I mean, the simplest thing would just be the seeders, basically a giant scraping process of discovering all possible nodes. They do focus on they're trying to make outbound connections to those inbound nodes. They obviously ignore the connection limits, but they're only on connected transiently. And so that is in part, they need to be able to connect, which means they will tend to only see nodes that are accessible inbound, but they will, from that, by querying those peers for other peers, they will learn about peers that are ostensibly online, but can't be connected to. So we will see a bit of, we can at least get that kind of information.
I mean, I'd be a bit concerned that we get a biased result because there are so few seeders. One possibility is to have sort of instrumentation in nodes, which is opt-in, so that if you're concerned about privacy, then it's not going to reduce your privacy. But that could report sort of the network graph as seen by a particular node.
Taylor?
There are also privacy preserving statistics that we could use, and Tor has had a lot of techniques for doing these kind of statistics in a privacy preserving way, and yeah, that's something we could look into. But I wouldn't want to block on it if we need those statistics to manage the network safely.
I mean, I think all we need is some volunteers to report their network map, and that would be enough information to make that decision.
All right. Anything else on this topic?
Well, I think it sounds like there is work to be done, and no current vocal volunteer to do it. I would say in the interim, I don't know what the plan is for Zebra in terms of update management and support and that style of thing. So I don't know, like, if Zebra D is released as a version that has a particular connection limit, what's the longevity of those nodes likely to be? How long is a decision made currently going to live on the network?
Good question. Let's see, Eddie's hand went up first, I think.
So as for volunteers, do you think this is something someone from the Zcash community can help with? Like, I did notice someone on the forum doing some studies around the node. So maybe we ask that person to have this deliverable.
The Zcash guys.
I don't know, but this person was, I think, heading more towards the privacy, and he did some studies, and he's been posting on the forum.
I think I know the person you're thinking of. Yeah,
the fingerprinting thread in the forum, the network fingerprinting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reading.
Yeah, that's it is a slightly different avenue than the performance aspect that we'd also be concerned with. But I mean, welcome all research.
Might be interested.
Yeah, either way, if you can come up with like a spec or write-up of work to be done, I think the Zcash community grants committee will be open to discuss this. And there's one more point I would like to bring up about ZCG. Maybe we can do that later in the call.
Sure. Yep. I'll make a note. We'll bring that up, Eddie. Taylor.
Yeah. So the plan for Zebra on the network is that when all of the other nodes upgrade and they all start refusing connections, Zebra will stop connecting to them, mark them as failed, delete them from its address book, and it won't shut down at a particular date, but it won't do anything on the network. So that's the plan there.
Okay, so if I'm running Zebra v 1.0 and I'm advertising a particular protocol version, so the lifetime of a ZebraD node is until the next network upgrade or until the next peer-to-peer protocol version upgrade?
Until the next peer-to-peer protocol version that where other nodes start rejecting the version it's on. So
okay.
it's until the next version effectively, but it's until the next version becomes mandatory, which is usually at a network upgrade.
Yeah, okay. So that is good to know. Yeah, it adds extra constraints if there were a problem that we had to deal with, I guess. But I suppose if there were a problem that we had to deal with, then we would just bump the network protocol and put out a release that where we start rejecting it before that. So yeah, it's at least a lever that can be used.
That was the goal, without having to make decisions about what our release cycle was or how long things should last or how long we'd guarantee.
Yeah. Yeah, so node just goes dormant and the user hopefully then notices that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I suppose when you get to the point of having a wallet, then they would notice because it would be louder.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. See you, Marshall. Marshall had to drop. Okay. If there's nothing else about the network connections at the moment, then Addie, you said you had something to discuss about the Zcash community grants?
Yeah, so we are thinking of writing RFPs, and one we would like to prioritize, and that is a UniFFI bridge for Zcash, so which connects with the Libras Zcash and provides easy implementation in Kotlin, Python, Ruby, the 4 languages supported by the UniFFI. So we're looking for help from ECC or ZF, anyone who's willing to write up a spec of what we should put out there.
So what was it that you wanted the scope of this to cover, or is the scope of this the thing you want to ask about?
Yeah, we need to write down the scope because that is how we can create the RFP.
Yeah. Because I looked into this a while back, sort of like experimenting it. That might be, I know I've mentioned it to some people, so that might be where it came through the grapevine. But I know they're still like in progress. So some support will be a bit trickier, I guess. But the thing I'd been looking at it for was mainly exposing the Zcash Client SQLite was the thing I was originally thinking of exposing. From that perspective is what I played with. But I guess anything where we wanted the canonical, like to enable a canonical version would be useful. So for example, the Zcash address crate, which I know Paku at ECC had been playing with for a bit, with UniFFI. The idea there would be that then we have the logic for unified addresses in a single place in Rust, and then if you want to push out a set of dependencies for that, and everyone bumps to the same thing, we bump the Rust version, and then the UniFFI version gets bumped, and then everything goes from there. Look, I think the main thing I ran into was figuring out exactly how to structure it. Like, did it need to be part of the same repositories as we were developing in, or would it be better managed as a separate repo? I'm suspecting a separate repo is what I'm thinking now. But yeah, there are definitely a couple of ones that make sense to expose as like primitives that others can build on. So yeah, we can open up an issue somewhere and start collecting some things that we'd like people to poke at and see if they can get going.
Right. I put a link in the chat to Paku's Hackworks kind of project where he was playing around with it. So if anybody's interested in looking at that. Nate.
Yeah, so I was just wondering for that if having some target use cases would be helpful. So like if somebody's going to be implementing a wallet, that's one thing. There might be other use cases. So does that help clarify the scope at all? Like if you need to implement a wallet, does that clarify which crates need to be wrapped?
Well, it would be pretty obvious in that case. It would be the Zcash client SQLite crate, for instance, or when we have a Zcash wallet crate, it would be the Zcash wallet crate. Would be the target for that. Whereas, for example, someone doing like a Python block explorer who wants to add support for unified addresses, being able to pull in a Zcash Zcash address crate, with Zcash address Python package that that does all the pieces for them would be nice.
Right. So maybe, I mean, the way I would want to organize it for a grant process is maybe have milestones with demo apps, like a demo wallet, I think, or something.
The thing I would want to see here is the main piece of work is someone sitting down and figuring out the process to build and manage these, and actually figuring out the extent to which UniFFI can actually wrap those APIs. And if there are changes needed either to UniFFI improving it or to the or maybe to the APIs that we expose if they're not quite buildable in a way.
So UniFFI is based on WebIDL, and I think I'm fairly confident that that would be expressive enough to express all of the interfaces we need.
Yes, but the question then is, okay, how do we set that up? And it's the question of figuring out what it looks like and then figuring out how to get in a position where then the ongoing maintenance is relatively trivial. Because once it's in that position, then it becomes relatively easy to support, because then it's just, we make a change. If we do to Zcash address crate, we bump the version there, we go across to wherever these are, we bump the version there, push the release button, and we're done. The primary work that would be useful for this sort of RFP would be getting to that, getting from 0 to 1.
Yeah, I mean, once we have that working for the existing APIs, I think the maintenance effort of sort of keeping it working for new APIs or API changes is pretty tractable.
Yeah, that actually being said, though, another thing that would be nice for a proposal for this would be, okay, so we're publishing libraries for a bunch of different things outside Rust. Could it also have like the automation to do so? Again, to sort of like reduce the maintenance burden of doing it, because I'm happy to push a button after I've made updates to the Zcash Rust crates, but having to remember how to do the full stack of everything else is work.
It has to be automated.
Yeah, it does come with a maintenance effort over the time period, but it will help a lot of developers wanting to play with Zec interfaces.
Absolutely.
I'm really enthusiastic about that, because I think it could open it up to a whole
the experiment
of developers.
The experiment I did with Zcash Client SQLite, it was so fun to just like write a little bit of Python and have a wallet working. So yeah, and the other thing that I think we had, the other reason I was thinking about Zcash Client SQLite is because that could be an alternative way to expose those Rust APIs to the mobile SDKs versus our current handcrafted FFIs that we use.
I mean, it's a pity that it doesn't support C++. I understand the reasons why it doesn't, but if it did, that would be very convenient.
Yeah, C++ is a different kettle of fish, and there are better solutions to that hopefully by now are in a position where we can actually use them. He says, as after this call, we'll be going back to do more FFI bashing for Zcashd.
Okay, so Stephen, will you be making a issue for this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
we can create one.
Yeah, just an issue on Zcash will be fine. I think for actually no, if this is wrapping the Rust stuff, an issue on Zcash librust Zcash would be the place for this, and we can figure out there sort of what the shape of this would, the ideal shape would look like.
Great.
Okay. All right.
I mean, automating the generation of the specific language bindings that's trivial because that's just one command once you have the UDL.
Yeah, but then like if we can get to the position where then like it can then just be pulled into our regular release process for the Rust crates, and it also just becomes a we use our credentials to push, but other than to do the final thing, but other than that, then that would be ideal.
Okay. All right, very good. Anything else, Addy, on the community grants front, or anyone?
That was it from me.
Okay, cool. All right, I like it, by the way. So, all right, anyone have anything else? No? All right. Well, everyone have a good weekend. We'll catch up in Discord. And
thanks, folks.
Keep your fingers crossed for this huge PR we're about to merge. So,
yeah, I will be pinging Zebra engineers as soon as I have my Zip 244 branch on top of that, so that you can start running with it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Talk to y'all later.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao for now.